Hello, welcome back. This is part 2 of replacing your CPU. By now you should have received your replacement CPU and are going to be fitting it now. So the easiest way to do that is lay your computer on its side with the motherboard nearest to ground. That way you can't drop anything. Remove your cooler. There are various coolers, so you have to really look up to find out exactly how to remove your cooler. Remember and unplug the fan as well before you try and pull it out. There you go. The discoloration you see on the CPU and the cooler, that's just the thermal grease. Hopefully you've got a replacement by now. The thermal grease, you get lots of different specifications of thermal grease. You're better buying pretty good stuff, that way you get a good thermal heat transfer between the two components. If you go for cheap stuff, then if you get spillages you might end up with a cheap conductive grease, or just a grease that is really poorly thermally conductive. The easiest time to clean the cooler is when it's actually in the socket. Use a good quality electrical cleaner, that way it evaporates any spillage, doesn't get any components that could cause damage later on. You get these for about £3 or £4 in a good electrical shop, Matlin, things like that. You want to get as much as possible off it, that way you can apply the new grease. You also want to do this to the cooler as well. If you've got any discoloration, sometimes you get this, like the acid from fingerprints can cause discoloration. Don't worry about it, don't scrape it, don't get an emery pad or a Brillo pad or anything like that. Just leave it. Discoloration has no effect at all on the thermal dissipation. Depending again on the socket of the CPU, it's just normally a wee spring clip or a half turn screw. Lift it out, be very careful with it. This one has got no pins. The pins are actually on the motherboard. Some CPUs have actually got the pins on the processor itself, so you've got to be very careful. That's why I lay it on its side, so if you drop it, it's going to fall straight back into the socket. Whereas if you drop it when it's up on its edge, it could fall anywhere and bend some pins. This is a new CPU coming in. You'll see some notches, various arrows, so for alignment, have a good look and just clarify that in your head before you attempt to put it in. Now again, you can, when it's in the socket, you can give it a wee wipe. Just lock it in place first, so it doesn't move about on top of the pins. Again, this is the easiest time to do this, that way you don't have to hold it in your hand at the risk of bending any pins. Now we're going to apply some thermal grease. There's been much debate over the years about how you should do this. Some people say just a pea-sized blob like that, and then put the heatsink straight on. Other people say spread it out evenly over the top of the CPU. This is what I'm doing here. Other people say do a division sign with the grease and let it spread out itself. The division sign stops any air bubbles collecting between the two units. It's up to yourself. I have tried all the methods and I find this one to be the best. As long as you check and make sure you're getting a good heat transfer and the CPU is running at its correct temperature on idle and under load. This one I'm using just now, the Arctic Silver 5, is a really good quality one. The 12mm is about £15 to £16. You can get smaller ones as well, but it's a very good quality one, and it takes a couple of heat ups and cool downs to really bed in and give it some maximum performance. It's also fairly thick as well, that's why I don't just leave it as a blob. Thinner ones, you've got some quite liquidy ones. You could just leave them as a blob if you want, but I really don't use them anymore, because if I'm going to use anything, I'll be as well doing it right, get the best of the best. So that's why I use this stuff. Again, it's called Arctic Silver 5. Anyway, nearly done with this. So just get as, I mean, it's a round cooler to a square CPU. The working part of the CPU is obviously in the middle, so that's why it's designed like that. But I try and get as good a covering on the CPU as possible. As you can see also, this doesn't actually take long. There's been very little stops and starts in this video, and we're at just about 6.5 minutes just now. So to remove and replace a CPU, you can do it quite easily in under 10 minutes. To install the cooler again, just make sure it's properly seated. Once it's in place, make sure it's not rocking. That's a sign of one of the legs isn't quite down right. Again though, you've got lots of different CPU coolers. This one relies on plastic inserts going through the motherboard, and the black the black bits of plastic goes through the centre of the plastic and spread it so it grips a hole. So as long they're a bit of a hit or a miss, to be honest, but as long as you take your time, get them in properly, you can get it right. And it also it's quite a good cooler. It's pretty small as well. So that's it. Now the screws have to be turned. It's about a quarter of a turn, and that way the black plastic locks into the white plastic and stops it coming back out again. But when you've done that again, always check, just make sure it's not rocking or loose at all. If there's any movement in any of the legs, then you've not got a good contact with the CPU, which would be devastating because it would blue screen straight away. There's also something I should point out as well. If you put the wrong CPU on your motherboard, nothing will happen when you start up. It's not your graphics card that's faulty, it's the wrong CPU for your motherboard. So don't worry, you should not have damaged anything, just get the right one. Okay, hope you've enjoyed this video. Nearly finished. Plug the fan back in and stand it back up and off you go.